Hey, hey, hey. I want to be excited and think that you're all just here for me, but I know you're not. And I'm really excited to bring up our next guest for this incredible panel that I know you've all been waiting for. The man, literally the person who plays the myth, Tom Hiddleston. Hey, hey.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? Great? Cool.
I think they're very excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here, yeah. Thanks so much for this weekend. It's been really fun. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, you've been out here meeting lots of fans and signing lots of autographs.
Yep.
Are you having a blast at Ace Comic-Con?
I'm having a blast at Ace Comic-Con. Yeah. There have been some very fun photographic ideas that people have presented to me.
Ooh, do tell.
Well, there have been quite a few bears dressed like this, which makes me laugh. What else? I'm suddenly drawing a blank on all the other ones.
We'll come back to it.
Okay.
You'll think about it. You'll be like, you're
There have been
literally
so
going to be
many.
in the middle of an answer, and you'll be like, oh, that one person. So you played in a role in a little franchise called the MCU. I just want to make sure that let's just get it out of the way. But for a lot of us nerds out there, and I think for you, the concept of Loki is something that's so long and something that roots back into Norse mythology.
Yeah.
And even in the Marvel universe was really a villain.
Yeah.
But your portrayal of Loki was a very complicated brother, frenemy, son. How did you first approach playing Loki as a role, having all of this source material to work with?
First of all, can everyone hear me okay? Yes, okay. I always have to check that. The longer my engagement with Loki has gone on, the deeper my astonishment that it's me. If I look back at it, it seems so unlikely that I would be playing the Norse god of mischief who has been around in the collective unconscious, certainly in the sort of northern hemisphere and Western culture for over 2,000 years. And when I first engaged to play it in Kenneth Branagh's Thor, diligently I went back to the comics, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Walt Simonson, Koipel, and then also went into the canon of the Norse myths, these extraordinary stories of how the ancient Scandinavian people made sense of the world. And there was also a script I was working off, and so I thought, well, there are key points in the script. He's a brother, he's a son, and those relationships needed to be calibrated quite delicately. But the tone of the character himself, who is he? Why is he? Was so fascinating because in the old Norse myths, as many of you will know, at the Council of the Gods, Loki was never trusted. He was always somebody who one was never sure what his motivations were. He was mercurial, he was mysterious, he was enigmatic. He was highly intelligent, but could use that intelligence for nefarious means. But in spite of that, he was always deemed necessary. And that when some terrible crisis befell the gods, and Odin and Thor and Frigga and the council of the gods, none of them knew what to do. They'd run out of ideas. There was always a knock on the table from the far end. Loki sitting on his own. I've got an idea. And it will be bonkers. But it just might work. And that, I think, is a really interesting thing as an actor to inhabit, is that there is someone, a character, Loki, who has represented chaos. Our lives as human beings are governed by those two forces of order and chaos. We like things to be ordered, but sometimes they're chaotic. And sometimes chaos is what you need. And that's what Loki is. And it's a really exciting thing to step into that as an actor.
And I think that really... Yes, please clap. Absolutely. And I think that personifies the evolution of the character as well, because there's these moments in Thor Ragnarok where you're like, all right, Thor's up a creek, there's no paddles, and then in walks in Loki, whether he wants to help or not, at the perfect moment. How has it been being able to evolve from this first iteration in Thor into what is ever more increasingly complex, but also, let's be real, it has taken on a life of its own. It's become one of the most beloved characters in the MCU. It's my niece's favorite. I love her to death for it. But how has that evolution, how has, for you, the character evolved?
Well, I think I've been incredibly lucky in that the depiction of the character, the writing of the character, was, for someone, supernatural, incredibly human. And there is a humanity to him that is very obvious, I think, in Kenneth Branagh's film. His vulnerability, his heartbreak, all that pain, but also then this other factor of his kind of gifts, some of which were taught to him by his mother, that he is a sorcerer. And it actually is in the Dark World, as well as in Ragnarok, is Loki is called upon to help Thor because he's the only one who can, in spite of this ancient rift between them, because of their childhood enmity. So in terms, it's a narrative gift for an actor to have all of that, fantastic, accessible emotion, and this idea that he's the only one with certain sets of keys. Yeah. And he's the only person who can open those doors. It's been a ride, and I'm just enormously grateful. I feel so lucky that I got to do this. I really do.
So I gotta ask, because there are people dying to know. This is not the end for Loki. There is going to be a live action series on Disney Plus. How excited are you about this? Because obviously everyone is excited about this.
That's amazing. I think I posted something about this. It is very exciting. I cannot say much about it, I'm afraid.
I tried.
Time will tell.
Well, we'll all be waiting. Okay. But as prolific as Loki has been, you also are a stage actor. You are a actor who has, as many times as your hairstyle has changed, as many roles as you have had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there should be a Tumblr dedicated to your hairstyles. But there's a Twitter. Clearly,
there we go.
I didn't even know. How has it been in balancing all of this in such a large role, but also taking on the fact that you are a very accomplished actor? You have a stage. Yes, you can clap. Totally fine.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
You know, you've also, and particularly for me, you've played some very meaningful roles for folks. Like you have played Hank Williams.
Yeah. Thank you.
Which cannot be easy, right? Because you were not from the United States. I don't know if you guys know, he's not from the United States.
By the way, I'm not from Asgard either. So.
Do you mean it's in a real place?
It is, but I'm not from there.
Okay, great, because you're going to break a lot of people's hearts.
Yeah.
But being someone who is from the South, it cannot be hard. I mean, it cannot be easy to go into something that historically is just not what you grew up with. It is the Deep South, particularly in the Hank Williams biopic. It's the Deep South.
Yeah.
And you really personified it, and even you even did your own singing in this movie.
Yes, I did. Yeah. Thanks.
How does one even step into one, getting an Alabama accent?
Yeah.
But two, really preparing yourself for that kind of role, or any kind of role when you're really stepping so far out of yourself.
Well, I always say that what I look for, no matter how far away the character seems to be from me, is points of connection. And so with Loki, for example, I think, well, he's a son. I'm a son. I understand what that is. He's playful. I have a playfulness in me. He's vulnerable. I have my own vulnerability. So you pull from yourself to some extent. And then what you don't have, you supply with imagination that's backed up by research. And that's the same approach to Hank, really, is I tried to find points of connection between me and him. I mean, there is some distance between us. I was born in 1981 in London. He was born in 1923 in Alabama. And we had very different lives. But one thing I connected to is that he was a performer and that he really understood the magic of the connection with a live audience. And he was incredibly, I looked at some of his old performances and he was incredibly charismatic, incredibly spontaneous and playful. And then, of course, there was all the things I didn't know, really, I didn't have access to. And that's, for me, that was the heavy lifting. It was just researching, listening to his voice, finding lost recordings, and the way he spoke is gone now, I think, even in the South.
Yeah.
And some of the crew in Louisiana who were from the South now, they said that I sounded like their grandfather. It was like a sound that had died out. And it's a rhythm thing as well. I mean, he would say, go out on stage and say, this one's bought us quite a few beans and biscuits. It's called. And it really had this really strong dialect.
It was almost in his soul, and I kind of can see that, particularly, and I love the fact that it also stars another one of your Marvel co-stars.
Yes, yeah.
And Elizabeth also did her own singing.
She did, yeah. And we have never worked together in the Marvel universe.
Oh,
yeah.
That's right. You have not. You're just, in the same circles.
That's right. Yeah.
You know some of the same people.
Yes.
You're friends from work.
Yeah, friends from work. Yeah. No, it was a lovely challenge, and music is a big inspiration for me. I have such profound respect for musicians, and I thought, wow, to make a film about someone who'd had such an impact on contemporary culture. I mean, really, we were talking a bit, and it struck me that Hank Williams had influenced some of the people who had gone on to change the face of the 20th century. He'd been an influence to Elvis Presley. He'd been an influence to Bob Dylan. He'd been an influence to Bruce Springsteen. I thought, wow, yeah, these are big boots. And as I was learning the songs, I started to understand that the vulnerability of a songwriter, a singer-songwriter, is that you're not saying somebody else's lines. These are lines that have come right from within you. So if Hank is singing "I'm so lonesome I could cry," it means he's been there and he's trying to communicate that feeling. And that, there's a sort of a purity of that openness, I thought, which is I had to honor in my interpretation.
And then